To the statement, I call Minister Mercer.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. With your permission, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to make a statement about the significant contribution of the nuclear test veterans from across the Commonwealth who participated in Britain's nuclear testing programme. 70 years ago, on the 3rd of October in 1952, the UK undertook its first nuclear test, and in so doing confirmed our country's status as the world's third nuclear power. Critical to this success were those who took part in our nuclear testing programme, and in doing so made a unique and unprecedented contribution to our national security. There is a direct line between the service of these men and women all those years ago and the safety and security of all nations continuing to this day. In recognition of their service, to mark 70 years since the first test, the government is undertaking a programme of recognition to mark the contributions of all service personnel and civilians who took part in the UK and later US nuclear testing programmes in Australia and the Pacific. This programme of recognition began yesterday with the UK's first commemorative event for nuclear test veterans at the National Memorial Arboretum in Staffordshire to mark the 70th anniversary of the first UK nuclear test. Going forward, the programme will include recognition of the role of military and civilian staff from Australia, New Zealand, Fiji and other Pacific islands who were involved in the nuclear testing operations, as well as an acknowledgement of the traditional owners of the lands that were used for nuclear testing. We will provide funds to support activities for nuclear test veterans and educate the public on their efforts. We are commissioning an oral history archive to ensure that the stories of the veterans who served are captured for future generations. The Prime Minister yesterday announced the creation of a new medal, the Nuclear Test Medal, which has been graciously approved by His Majesty the King. This important medal will recognise and commemorate the service to the nation by participants in the UK's nuclear testing programme. This cohort of veterans, made up of both military and civilian participants, made a significant contribution to our enduring international security. In establishing the UK's nuclear deterrent during the critical early years of the Cold War, it is important that their service is recognised and commemorated properly, and a medal is an important part of that. It is expected that the eligibility for this medal will be announced in the early part of 2023, at which time related eligibility guidance and information about the application process will be laid before Parliament. It was a privilege to officially commemorate for the first time our nuclear test veterans at the National Memorial Arboretum yesterday. We gathered together to say thank you to those who were gathered there yesterday and to the families of those we have already lost. This nation today still enjoys the freedoms and privileges afforded by their service that started 70 years ago. And it is right that they have now finally received official recognition of their service. I would like to thank my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, for announcing the medals for nuclear test veterans yesterday. His energy for making this the best place in the world to be a veteran is to be supported across the House. Without his support, yesterday's event would simply not have been a success. I would also like to thank my right honourable friend, the Defence Secretary. His support for this cause over many years has been noted by campaigners. I would also like to pay tribute to the often unseen members of the civil service who've gone well above and beyond in the last few nights, particularly those who've worked tirelessly in the Office for Veterans Affairs and in Number 10 on this. But primarily I want to record from this dispatch box the government's thanks to our veterans of our nuclear tests. From one veterans campaigner to another, I salute you. I salute your relentlessness, I salute your courage, and I salute your determination. Your legacy is long and impressive. And of course, I would like to pay tribute to the families, friends and supporters from all sides of nuclear test veterans over the last 70 years. Your support to these men and women has been steadfast. from those who work in the media to those who have campaigned for so long in Parliament itself from all parties, such as the Honourable Members for Salford and Eccles, Basildon and Billericay, and the Right Honourable Member for South Holland and the Deepings. I salute you and I thank you that we are now finally delivering on that long overdue medallic recognition of our nuclear test veterans. A medal does not signify the end of that recognition, but instead a new beginning of official recognition of the Nuclear Test Veterans Service with the initiatives I've outlined today. I look forward to working with all members of the House in the years ahead to get this right.
We now come to Shadow Minister Rachel Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I want to thank the Minister for advance sight of his statement. Yesterday's announcement was a huge victory for our nuclear test veterans and their families. Finally, these veterans will now receive the long overdue medallic recognition that they so deeply deserve. When I've met nuclear test veterans and their family members in meetings and at rallies, I found their passion for justice truly inspiring. And I want to take this opportunity to specifically congratulate the tireless perseverance of nuclear test veterans campaigners that made today's announcement happen, including Labrats, BNTVA, the Daily Mirror and their columnist, the relentless Susie Boniface. I was privileged enough to join them at the National Memorial Arboretum yesterday to witness the announcement and hear their moving testimonies. The outburst of applause was followed by deep sighs of simple relief that these medals have finally been agreed to, 70 years on from the first British test of a nuclear weapon. Our country owes the nuclear test veterans from across the UK and the Commonwealth a debt of gratitude. Their service far away from home ensured the UK had a nuclear deterrent as part of our security and safety. They made this commitment to our country at great personal cost. Reports state that nuclear test veterans have a legacy of cancers, blood disorders and rare disease, while their wives report 3 times the usual rate of miscarriage. Their children also have 10 times the normal amount of birth defects and are 5 times more likely to die as infants. This was the cost of our nation's safety. Today's statement is the House's opportunity to say thank you to our nuclear test veterans for their service and their deep personal sacrifices. So on behalf of the Labour Party, I want to thank the nuclear test veterans who served at operations Hurricane, Totem, Mosaic, Buffalo, Grapple, Antler, Dominic, Kittens, Thames, Rats, Vixen, Ayres, Hercules and Brumby. I know that only around 1,500 of the 22,000 service personnel who took part in these trials are thought to still be alive, so I hope the nuclear test veterans' families and descendants finally feel that this historic injustice has been recognised. It is completely right that these medals can be awarded posthumously. Their dedication to our country will not be forgotten. The Labour Party has been proud to give nuclear test veterans our fullest backing. The Shadow Defence Team has consistently supported their campaign for justice, together with my honourable friend, the Member for Parliament for Salford and Eccles. And the Leader of the Opposition was also the first party leader to meet with the nuclear test veterans and their families and commit his support to their campaign. To ensure this never happens again, we are committed to a complete review of the system for awarding medals to serving personnel and veterans. The recognition they deserve should not require having to resort to lengthy campaigns or ministerial interventions. So will the Minister commit to ensuring the eligibility criteria for the nuclear test veterans medallic recognition is as wide as possible? And what resources will be put into finding living descendants of nuclear test veterans to receive posthumous medals? And as my final point, will the Minister support Labour's proposal for a root and branch review of the whole medals process? Thank you.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank my honourable friend for her kind words. She's absolutely right to pay tribute to the campaigners in this space. You know, as politicians, obviously, we come and go, but these individuals have been campaigning over many, many years. I met a man yesterday who started 60 years ago campaigning for a medal. And I paid tribute to them. I paid tribute to their relentlessness and their ability to keep going. And I'm delighted we've been able to do something in this space, cognizant of the fact that there is more to do. When it comes to eligibility, of course, the eligibility will be as wide as we possibly can. And we're determined that whilst this announcement is one thing, actually delivering it to people for whom it means so much is where the challenge lies. There are resources going into this. You know, part of what we're doing, £450,000 we've committed to gathering an oral archive, which will require us to go around and gather these experiences and work with groups such as Lab Rats or the BNTVA and others to get it right. When it comes to the honours system, look, I think the Defence Secretary has been clear on this, that going forward, he is prepared to look at how military operations sort of fit into the bracket of medallic recognition. I do think, though, we need to be very careful around political interference in that. But I think that the Defence Secretary has made his position clear on a number of occasions about this particular issue. In fact, that work started. We saw Operation Pitting during the summer, where medals were awarded outside of the usual parameters. So I think that's an ongoing discussion we can certainly have.
John Barrow.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First of all, can I congratulate the Government and the Minister for the good work he has done on this issue. The House may be very briefly aware that a number of colleagues across both sides have campaigned on this issue for quite a while. In 2012, I was lucky enough to lead a campaign which finally saw a Prime Minister, David Cameron at the time, actually acknowledge the work of the nuclear test veterans and thank them at the dispatch box. But we also managed to secure £25 million into the Aged Veterans Fund, which was largely there for nuclear test veterans and their descendants. We should never forget the descendants in this. Nuclear test veterans themselves often are more interested in their descendants and their welfare than themselves. So I congratulate the Minister. Could I ask him to make sure that the momentum keeps going, because we have still a lot to do, but we've accomplished an awful lot, including this initiative from the Government now.
Minister.
Look, I pay tribute to my honourable friend, the member for Basildon and Billericay, and all his efforts, as he rightly identified in 2012 for the first time. David Cameron, the then Prime Minister, mentioned official recognition of nuclear test veterans, and he's right about £25 million going into the Aged Veterans Fund as a result of a lot of his work. So, look, I pay tribute to him for his campaigning over the years. And absolutely, this is the beginning. A medal is a part of the recognition, and I hope this is the good start of momentum that we can make towards making, actually standing by our promises and making this the best country in the world to be a veteran.
We now come to SNP spokesperson Carol Monaghan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Minister for advance sight of the statement. This is great news for the nuclear test veterans. The recognition that they carried out operations in a dangerous theatre has been many decades in the making. And I commend the tireless work of nuclear test veterans and their families, in particular Alan Owen from Lab Rats, the British Nuclear Test Veterans Association, and, as the opposition spokesperson has said, Susie Boniface from the Mirror. These veterans have had to wait decades with no reward. And tragically, with only an estimated 1,500 test veterans left, this medal has come too late for many. Why has it taken so long? And whilst I welcome this decision, we have to, as the Minister himself acknowledges, we have to recognise that there is much more work to be done to recognise the extent of nuclear test veterans' suffering. In the US, in Canada and in France, the test veterans have been compensated. So will the Ministry of Defence now consider a financial package of compensation for nuclear test veterans who have suffered poor health consequences as a result of their exposure to ionising radiation? Will the MOD also consider compensation for families who have suffered health complications as a result of their parents' exposure? And what recognition will be given to those civilians who were involved, including those in the Royal Fleet Auxiliary, such as my constituent, now tragically deceased William Caldwell, who was present during the tests? This is a great first step, but it's only a first step, and I look forward to hearing what the Minister plans to do next.
Thank you very much. And I thank my honourable friend for her questions, and they're very fair questions indeed. The one about why it's taken so long, I think it is a fair question. I think that as our sort of perspective and time from these nuclear tests has passed and improved our perspective and understanding of what we ask people to do, and the security that they generated for our country has become more sharply into focus, I think that certainly has a role to play in it. When it comes to compensation, look, those who there are war pensions available, and indeed nuclear test veterans do claim war pensions from the Ministry of Defence. At the moment, when I was there in 2019, we created a sort of a clearer care pathway for individuals to come forward and make those claims, but I totally accept there's more to do. Other countries do it differently, and we're always open as the science becomes clearer. We're always open to making sure that we look after these people. This Prime Minister is absolutely clear that we will stand by our commitments and fulfil our manifesto commitments to our veterans, not only in what we say and do from here, but how it feels to be a veteran as well. And that is an ongoing piece of work. In terms of civilians applying for this medal, then of course it is open to civilians, and the specific criteria around that will be laid before Parliament early in the new year.
Dean Russell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sadly, some of the brave nuclear test veterans are no longer around to receive their medals. So can my right honourable friend assure me that the medals will be given posthumously, so their families can be assured that we honour every single person who played a part in efforts to keep our world safe?
Minister.
So I pay tribute to my honourable friend and his constant campaigning really on veterans issues as the member for Watford. When it comes to posthumously awarding this, the criteria, like I said, will be laid out in 2023, but families will be able to apply. I accept whenever you do something like this, it will come too late for many, and obviously that is a point of regret. Look, we're going to do everything we can to try and make sure that those families who have lost loved ones throughout this process are able to apply and looked after through that process.
Rebecca Long-Bailey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was with my constituent Laura and her granddad John yesterday as the Prime Minister made his announcement, and they cried with joy. And I just want to thank the Minister for his unwavering support and everything that he's done to make yesterday a reality, as well as the unwavering support of the Right Honourable Member for South Holland and the Deepings and other members across this House, such as the Right Honourable Member for Uxbridge and South Ruislip, the Prime Minister, the Leader of the Opposition, the Right Honourable Member for Basildon and Billericay, and of course Labrats, the BNTVA and Susie Boniface from the Mirror, and nuclear testing veterans themselves. Now, days like yesterday, where politicians transcend party lines for the common good, don't happen very often, and we should celebrate them when they do. But the Minister knows that much more needs to be done now, and I know that he's truly supportive of the veterans. So will he undertake to ensure that the Prime Minister meets with me, my constituent and other nuclear testing veterans to discuss war pension reform, financial support, the release of blood and urine records, and research and an inquiry into all that happened to these men and their families?
Of course, I pay tribute to my honourable friend and her relentless campaigning on this, whether I've been in and out or out of government. We've had conversations, and she's continued to relentlessly campaign on their behalf, and I know that they're incredibly grateful for what she has done. When it comes to the Prime Minister meeting those who took part in these events yesterday, he committed to do that when he saw these families. I know he was very much moved by the events of yesterday, and look, we're committed going forward to get this right. I've seen the stories around medical records and so on being destroyed. I don't recognise that, okay, and I have looked into it, but I'm always open to evidence of that she or others may have. And I'm determined that, look, we will get this right. Okay, the medal is one part of it, but that's not everything for everybody. And I'm determined that the government will get our recognition of what these nuclear test veterans did right.
Simon Fell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I commend the Minister on this statement and thank on behalf of myself and my constituents, nuclear test veterans, for everything they've done. The work that's going on in Barrow at the moment, building the next generation of the nuclear deterrent, stands on their very, very tall shoulders. Will the Minister commit to making sure that we never forget the sacrifice of those nuclear test veterans and the critical role they've played in keeping Britain and our NATO allies safe, and in doing so make sure that access to this new medal is made as widely and easily available as possible?
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for his question, and what I would say is that there's an important piece of work alongside this, and it's, you know, as I've said a number of times, it's important people understand that a medal is one part of it. Okay, so there is, we've committed almost £500,000 into recording and documenting an oral archive of the experiences of these test veterans, and absolutely, you know, I think. You know, one of the things that, you know, I campaigned on for many years is for us to truly understand what it means to go through these things, right? So the pain of not being recognised after serving your country, I think, is something that was etched all over the faces of many of the people there yesterday. That's something certainly that the Prime Minister noted. I did as well, and yeah, going forward, we're determined to get this right.
This announcement is hugely welcome, and I pay tribute to everyone who has made it a reality. It has been a privilege to meet nuclear test veterans and their families on a number of occasions. I'm sure the Minister is aware of issues around Veterans UK compensation and war pensions, and that's why myself and the all-party group for veterans have launched a survey, and I hope when we publish the findings that the Minister will listen to it. But can I ask the Minister specifically how many nuclear test veterans have had their applications for war pensions rejected?
So I don't have that data in terms of how many, but I'm happy to write to her after this. When it comes to Veterans UK, look, my position on this doesn't change sort of inside or outside the tent, right? There are good people there who work hard, but have been underinvested in by governments of all colours over the years, to the point where 2 years ago they're still working off paper records. Now, clearly you are not going to get optimal results for veterans in that space. This government has committed £25 million into digitising that whole space, but I'm clear that there are still too many people who have too bad experiences of Veterans UK, and I'm committed, and the Defence Secretary is committed to working out why that is. You know, it's a massively important part of getting right our veterans care in this country. For lots of people every day they will deal with Veterans UK, and obviously we want them to feel like we're actually making this the best country in the world to be a veteran, and I accept we have work to do in that space.
Aaron Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday was obviously a very good day, so could I thank the Minister, the Prime Minister, Defence Secretary, but also all the members in this chamber. As the Honourable Lady opposite said, as my Honourable friend said, could I also add actually to the names they listed, my Honourable friend for Brecon and Radnorshire, who I see is in her place, who has been campaigning on this since before she was elected. And could I thank them on behalf of a specific constituent of mine, Mr. Christopher Jeffries, who wrote to me earlier this year. He said, I served in the Royal Air Force between 1955 and 1960. Between 1957 and 58, I did 2 tours of duty on Christmas Island as a member of 49 Squadron, the squadron tasked with testing Britain's first hydrogen bomb. Although I was not affected by radiation, very many of my colleagues were. And for the last 60 years, we have been fighting for some recognition of our service by way of a campaign medal. I'm so pleased that we've delivered finally for Mr. Jeffries, and would the Minister take the opportunity to pay tribute to him and his colleagues for all the work that they did.
Look, I pay huge tribute to Christopher Jeffries and to all of the veterans and civilians who, at that time when the science was very unclear about the long-term effects of these tests, actually went through that experience for the greater good in order to provide a blanket of security that all nations enjoy today and continues to be the backbone of our defence. So, of course, I pay tribute to him, not only for what they did at the time, but as I've said before, campaigning is hard, relentless campaigning is hard, particularly in this place. But people like him have been going for a long time, and I'm delighted they finally got the recognition they deserve.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I would like to join honourable and right honourable colleagues right across the House in paying tribute to the nuclear test veterans, the Daily Mirror for their campaign, and also my honourable friend from Salford who has been tireless in her campaigning. Reports suggest that the government's own long-term study has suggested that nuclear test veterans were almost 4 times more likely to die from radiogenic cancers than any other serviceman. So what plans does the Minister have to study the impact of nuclear test veteran service on their health and that of their families?
Minister.
So there's been 4 longitudinal studies on this over the years, and the truth is that the science is not as clear as we would like. We would like it to be. If the science was clear, this would have been easier to resolve a long time ago. But look, it's not a closed book, and we will continue to look at it. The last one was only 3 years ago, and anyone who thinks they've been affected by this must go to Veterans UK, must apply for a war pension. There are sort of accelerated pathways for nuclear test veterans to get into Veterans UK, and any individual cases I'd be delighted to help her with.
Virginia Crossman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wrote to the Prime Minister on behalf of the AMSC and those who participated in the UK's nuclear testing programme to ask that nuclear test veterans receive medals in recognition of their dedication and service. And so this news today is very welcome. I'm also pleased that the Minister has confirmed that relatives will be able to apply so that their loved ones receive the nuclear test medals posthumously. Will the Minister agree to come to Anismore to actually meet some of these families and veterans and extend his personal thanks?
I thank my honourable friend for her campaigning over the years. I'd love to come to Anismore. I know of a lot of her work up there. I know a lot of the Armed Forces breakfast clubs and things like that, and I'd love to come and support her in what she's doing. I'm delighted that relatives can now apply for medallic recognition. I think it's an extremely important part of service in this country, and I'd be delighted to come and meet some test veterans up in her patch when I can.
Jonathan Edwards.
Diolch, Mr Speaker. Can I join the universal welcome across the House for this statement today and thank the Minister for his work. Can I also, please, Mr Speaker, congratulate my constituent, Mr Alan Owen, the founder of Lab Rats, and all the other campaigners who have fought tirelessly on this campaign. He mentioned in his statement and in answering many questions that this is the start of the recognition. Can I therefore echo one of the points made by the member for Salford and Eccles, who mentioned the need to release the medical records of the former nuclear test veterans, as that would be a clear indication that the government values their contribution.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the government's clear. I'm very clear that there is no sort of deliberate blocking of anything like that. I think that we all have to accept the science is not straightforward. And if it was, this would have been resolved some time ago. Also, different countries, different peer countries do it differently for different reasons, and we're always open to those conversations. So, no, I thank him for his kind words, and it is the start of proper recognition for these people. And I hope, as he can see the work that we undertake going forward, that he'll feel that we're doing a good job on that.
Jim Shammond.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can I first of all thank the Minister? It's been a long campaign. And the Minister has delivered, and we thank you for that, and also to the Prime Minister as well. I'm thrilled to learn of the awarding of the medals for the veterans of Britain's nuclear test on the plutonium anniversary. This is a true commemoration of the service and contribution of our brilliant veterans and their service personnel. Does the Minister agree that the recognition of all veterans in Australia, New Zealand, Fiji and Kiribati under UK command should be noticed for their enduring service to our great nation? And for those who have died, can the Minister confirm that the families left will be in receipt of their loved ones' medals, and any financial compensation will also be available for them? Thank you.
Sure, and indeed we were the last of those nations actually to provide some sort of medallic recognition. So New Zealand has a commemorative coin. It's similar in the United States as well. Australia has a similar programme, and we're constantly speaking to all these nations all the time. We're also very aware of, these tests were carried out in indigenous lands in Australia, and indeed, the UK contributed £20 million to sort of clear up these tests at the times. But there is an ongoing discussion to be had in that place about how we properly recognise the commitment of indigenous people to this as well, and the security that ultimately we all enjoy every day in this place. So no, he's absolutely right. When it comes to compensation, as I've said, there is a war pension available, and any veteran who feels that they are owed that war pension, there are clear pathways now into Veterans UK, and if that's not the case, then if he writes me, I'll be delighted to look at it.
That completes the statements. We now come to the 10-minute rule bill.